So we have a special guest on our show this afternoon. I'd like to welcome Ontario Premier Doug Ford to our show. Premier Ford has led the province for the past 5 years, championing himself as a builder. He's building a stronger economy and is attracting new investment to the province, including in the areas of electric vehicles and batteries. Prior to being in provincial politics, Premier Ford was a Toronto City Councillor. He's also a successful businessman and owner of Deco Labels. I believe the Premier also had a radio show, coincidentally enough, with his brother called The City on News Talk 1010. And nice coincidence that it was 2 p.m., same time slot as my show. And that's a funny coincidence. So I'd like to welcome to the show Premier Ford. Welcome, Premier.
Well, thanks so much, Alan, for having us on. It brings back good memories. And Rob and I were on the show from 2 o'clock to 4 every Sunday. And I know the ratings went through the roof at that time. At least that's what I was told. So let's get your ratings through the roof as well.
That would be great. Thank you so much. So I thought I'd start off by asking you what you feel or how you feel the state of business is in Ontario. From conversations I've had with small businesses, conversations I've had with Dan Kelly, head of CFIB, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, him and I believe that business is sort of flat, sort of stagnant. We had a pretty good bump up coming out of the pandemic, I guess a couple of years ago, but things have really started to slow down, with talk about a possible recession the end of this year or possibly a recession in 2024. How do you think, or what do you think the state of business is in the province of Ontario?
What I see, the business is just booming right now here in Ontario. I'll give you one example, and I mentioned all the other premiers. First of all, Ontario is leading North American job creation, economic development. People are investing in Ontario from all over the world, and I'll give you some examples in a minute. But, out of the 60,000 jobs that were produced last month in Canada, 55,800, or let's say 56,000 jobs out of the 60,000 jobs, 93% were created right here in Ontario. That's pretty staggering. And the number of jobs since we've taken office in 2018 is now topped over 700,000. So there's 700,000 more people working today than were working 5 years ago. We just signed 2 historic deals in the auto sector with Stellantis and Volkswagen, creating thousands of jobs, not to mention the 30,000 spin-off jobs that are coming from Volkswagen alone in St. Thomas, London area. And then down in the Windsor area, thousands of spin-off jobs. And on top of the spin-off jobs, what comes with that is the infrastructure of roads and highways and bridges and schools and hospitals. And it really gets a community thriving down there. We also have seen investments of over $25 billion in the last 2 years here in Ontario. I call it the EV revolution. We're the only jurisdiction in the entire world that have 6 of the top auto manufacturers opening up here in Ontario. And not to mention the tech sector, we've seen, hundreds of thousands of jobs being created there. We've seen $3 billion of investment in life sciences, the pharmaceutical industry, manufacturing's coming back to Ontario. And I get comments all the time from foreign investors or from consul generals from around the world and ambassadors and governors saying, you guys are just going full steam in Ontario. We've cut over $8 billion of burden off the backs of small and medium-sized companies. That's not once, that's every single year. So we're attracting companies. I always say, Alan, government doesn't create jobs. We create the environment and the conditions for companies to come here and thrive and prosper and grow. And when that happens, so do the employees thrive, prosper, and grow. So there's 700,000 more people that can pay a mortgage, can pay rent, can do things they might otherwise not be able to do here in Ontario. We live in the greatest jurisdiction in the world, and I want to thank the people of Ontario, the hard workers in Ontario, to create that environment.
So the environment, I guess, is what's attracting these foreign businesses. I guess that's what you would say. So they come in, they love the environment here in Ontario, and that's why they're setting up shop.
That's correct.
Interesting. So over the last couple of days, I've heard your comments about interest rates. I know been asked the question about interest rates, obviously inflation. People are feeling the effects of rising costs in general. We know that inflation still exists. You're looking at groceries costing 9% more this year than it did last year. Obviously, interest rates have gone up again. Most recently, we're now looking at a prime rate that the bank set at about 7.2%. So right now, the average Ontarian is definitely finding it a lot more difficult to cope. Costs are rising for the average family. Costs are rising for the average business. What can your government do? What can you do to help these small businesses, to help business in general, or to help the average family in Ontario cope with these higher interest rates and higher inflation rates?
Well, thanks for that. First of all, I understand what the Bank of Canada is doing. I totally disagree with them. They're trying to slow down inflation, and we won't be able to tell the impact for maybe 6 months down the road. Inflation has dropped to about 3.5%. I believe it's going to go down. But what they don't understand is what's happening to the families when they have to go renew their mortgage. The only people that are making tons of money are the banks. When you renew your mortgage, it's hurting families. And really, the monetary policy is a conversation for the federal government to have with the Bank of Canada. It's not our jurisdiction. But in saying that, I'll tell you what we are doing. I mentioned the $8 billion we're reducing off the backs of small, medium-sized companies every single year. We're the only jurisdiction in the entire country that have cut the gas tax 10 cents per liter. That's hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And I just wish the federal government could give people a break on the worst tax anyone could face, and that's the carbon tax. They've bumped up these prices to close to 40 cents a liter. Just imagine if they could knock that off, because even when I was in Manitoba with the other premiers, they're paying $1.57. We're paying about the same, $1.57, 59, and that's what reduces the inflation. And then we scrap the license plate stickers for 8 million people driving cars, saving the family roughly about $240, throughout the year, and they don't have to renew that. We dropped the tolls on highways 412 and 418. And I talked to a lot of people out in Durham. They love it because that was costing them hundreds of dollars every single year, and causing congestion because people would avoid the highway and local traffic. We also reduced the cost for childcare, and by 2025, we're going for the $10 a day childcare. We're almost halfway there already. We've increased the minimum wage, going up from $15.50 to $16.55 per hour. And to be very frank, you can't find people even for $16.55. So that helps increase their wages as well. We reduced the tuition fees by 10% and extended the freeze to tuition hikes for kids going to university for 2022-23 school year. And then we expanded we call it the LIFT, LIFT tax credit for over 700,000 more people, to a tune of 1.7 million low-income workers qualify for LIFT and the total amount. So we're doing everything we can. We've never raised the tax, by the way, and even on the housing, when these municipalities want to go to impact and say, "Oh, let's raise taxes," that's the last thing I would ever do, is raise taxes on residential homes. People can barely afford to pay their mortgages now, so we're really doing everything we can at provincial level to reduce costs. We need the federal government to step up and reduce that carbon tax.
You bring up taxes, and I was actually going to ask you about taxes, so a good lead in there. I know that obviously living in Ontario, as I do, and you as well, and especially in the Toronto area, we hear lately about our new mayor in Toronto possibly raising taxes coming up. But overall, we live in one of the highest jurisdictions for taxes in North America. And so, yeah, you couple that with higher interest rates, higher inflation, it's becoming difficult. I know there are a lot of individuals that have told me recently that it's hard to live in the GTA just because of the higher taxes, the higher inflation, the higher now interest rates, et cetera. What would you say to those families, right, that are now at a higher tax rate or will be paying even more perhaps if they live in Toronto coming up? What can the province do? I know you've mentioned a whole bunch of things so far, but I get a lot of questions, obviously, as an investment advisor. about taxes. How can they lower your taxes? What can we do? What was there anything we could do? And there's not a lot right now. Obviously, investing in an RSP is one of them. But overall, what would you say to those families that are just struggling with taxes as well as now higher interest rates?
Well, I'm not going to rattle off all the same items I just did, but I'm doing everything I can to reduce taxes. As for the mayor of Toronto and other mayors, a lot of municipalities and at all levels of government, I'll say federal, provincial, and municipal, but municipal is more grassroots. Government does not have an income problem; they have a spending problem. They want to continue spending. When Rob, my brother, and I were down at City Hall, we delivered the first year. We walked in, Alan. The first words out of the city manager's mouth: "We have a $778 million deficit. You're going to have to raise taxes 20%." And I said, "We're going to drive efficiencies," which we did. We delivered the first year 0% tax increase. We saved over $1 billion for the taxpayers. And I just want to work collaboratively with the new mayor and, try to get this philosophy of just raise taxes on people is unacceptable. And I go back again to the federal government with this carbon tax. They're adding, to be exact, I said 40 cents, be exact, it's 37 cents a liter to the gasoline by 2030. We need to start running government more efficiently, all three levels. As for the province, we're making sure that people have good paying jobs, more opportunities to grow and be able to buy a home. But it goes back to housing as well, Alan. We have 504,000 people, the fastest growing region in North America, bar none. No one even comes close. Last year, 504,000 people arrived in our province, and it comes down to supply and demand on the housing. We need to get homes built, affordable homes, attainable homes, regular homes, and bring the costs down. Let's flood the market with housing, and hopefully it will level off or at least reduce the cost. But we can't do it alone. We need the support, cooperation of the municipal and federal government. And I'd like just once, either level of those governments come up with a way to save people money. We're one of the only jurisdictions, and I've close communication with all the provinces and territories. We're the only jurisdiction in the country that's actually reducing the burden of tax off the backs of the hardworking common folk out there.
Yeah, you mentioned taxes when you walked into the city hall. I guess it's always easy, right? Low hanging fruit. First thing you think of, well, you're gonna have to raise tax to raise money because there is no money. And so I think that's the first thing that a leader has an option to do, and it's easy to do, but at the same time, probably not the best thing to do. So I guess lastly, I'd like to, ask you an opinion or a question about what is the one thing that you want Ontarians to know that your administration is working on, either currently providing or will be providing in the future. What is that one thing that all the listeners listening to this show would want to know and be thankful for or be happy that Premier Doug Ford is working on at this moment with your government?
Oh boy, that's I go on for an hour on all the items, but I'm just going to name a few. There's never been a larger investment into our healthcare than what we're doing. We put in over $20 billion $20 billion into healthcare. We're making sure that they have convenient care closer to home. We're revitalizing the healthcare system. We've put $50 billion into building new hospitals. Either you're getting a new hospital in your area or you're getting an addition to the hospital. We hired over, I think it was a record last year with nurses, over 12,000 nurses registered, 8,000 doctors since we've taken office. We're building medical schools. We're spending $184 billion on infrastructure, building schools, and as I mentioned, hospitals, and building more highways, be it the 413 or the Bradford bypass. We're creating an environment for people to go out there and pretty well. You go into any corporate park, industrial park, knock on a door, and vast majority of the people you're hired on the spot. And we're putting $1.4 billion into skilled trades, training people that they'll have a career for life, a job for life. If they have a skilled trade, we know that 1 in 5 jobs in the future are going to be in the skilled trades. We have more cranes going up in just Toronto alone, not mentioning the GTA, than the five of the largest centers, more than New York, Chicago, Seattle, Washington, LA combined. So, the world is watching us right now. We're doing really, really well as a province compared to other jurisdictions around the world. Where trade with the U.S. has increased. We do about $460 billion of two-way trade with the United States. And if we were a standalone country, Ontario, which I'd never recommend, but if we're a standalone country, we would be the U.S.'s third largest trading partner, only next to Mexico and China. And the U.S. is facing massive trade deficits with those two. The $460 billion in two-way trade is pretty well split down the middle. So right now we're blessed. I'll tell you, and I'm not taking the credit. All the people and the employers, small businesses, medium and large, they have confidence in the government. I always say government doesn't create jobs; we create the environment for companies to come. And we have the brightest people anywhere in the world. Right here in Ontario, we have the greatest colleges and universities anywhere in the world. We graduate over 65,000 STEM graduates every year. And people that may not know what STEM stands for, it's science, technology, engineering, and math. So we're really getting ready for the jobs of the future.
It's amazing to hear all this, especially coming out of the pandemic, how much we've ramped up business. I talk to a lot of manufacturers, and it's interesting to see how that sector of the market is doing. It's great to hear, Premier. It's great to hear, and to hear all this going on and still be responsible in terms of spending, right? You talk about being responsible in spending and not getting obviously too far into the red, and trying to balance the books at the end of the day, which is obviously important as well. So it's great to hear the enthusiasm, and it's great to hear that our province is doing so well and will continue to do well under your government. So with that, I want to thank you for coming on the show this afternoon. It's been a pleasure having you and letting everybody know the state of Ontario and how things are going and how positive things are. And we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope that that the interest rates don't go up too much in the future. And I think we're kind of towards the end of that, so that should give people some hope there. So overall, thank you again for being on the show.
Well, thanks so much, Alan. And let's just keep going forward. And God bless the people of Ontario. We have the greatest jurisdiction anywhere in the world to live and raise a family and start a company. But thank you for your leadership, and it's Team Ontario.